everyone. It is a sincere honor of mine to be with you. It's an honor and a blessing and a privilege to be amongst my fathers, to be amongst all of you. Father George, I think we've been trying to set up this meeting for a couple of years. And finally, it happened. So I am so glad to be amongst you and to take your blessings. So I come to you all the way from San Francisco. By the way, this is where I live. I've been living in San Francisco. Is that good or bad? I've been living in California for almost 30 plus years. I was born and raised in Egypt, Cairo. My father was a priest. He's been in heaven for so long. And my background is in philosophy and psychology. And I wanted to, as I was asked just a minute ago, what got me into apologetics. I got into the ministry of apologetics 20 years ago because I wanted to marry philosophy with my precious Orthodox faith. And that's the story of apologetics. I wanted to discuss with you two themes or two subjects that are somewhat related. Give you a quick introduction to apologetics. What is it? Why we should do it, and most importantly, how we should do it in this challenging culture that we live in. And the second subject or topic or theme will revolve around the existence of God. Does God exist? And if He does exist, how can I prove beyond reasonable doubt with evidence that the Christian God is the true God? So, and again, we'll use logic and reason in discussing these two themes. Are we all good? All right. So, I would like to, as I speak, if you have a clarifying question, please interrupt, raise your hand, and we'll would like to make this more of a dynamic, engaging session. This is not just a one-dimensional lecture, because if that's the case, 15 minutes, you'll all fall asleep. So I want you to engage with me, please. All right. Apologetics, defending our precious Orthodox faith. What is it? What is apologetics? Man, people think apologetics is to apologize. No, it is not. What is apologetics? Well, apologetics is a branch of theology devoted to the defense of the Christian faith. The word apologetics comes from the Greek word apologia, which means to give a defense. Christian apologetics, thank you, but I'm afraid this will actually help us all fall asleep. Can we do half, please? If you don't mind, I just would love to see their faces as well.
Not to sleep.
What is that?
And not to sleep.
And not sleep, exactly.
The other way around.
How about the other half? Thank you. Okay. Are you good? Are you good with that? Or maybe can we turn one more? Yeah. You know what? If we can turn the whole thing on, you guys can read the screen. Yeah, we can just keep the lights on. Thank you so much. All right. So, apologetics, apologia, as I mentioned, Christian apologetics is defending the Christian faith. Thank you. This is good. So, the question. Well, what's the connection between apologetics to defend our precious faith and evangelism to share our precious faith? Is there a connection? Yes, there is. You do one when you do the other. When you're evangelizing, you're doing apologetics, defending the faith. And when you're defending, you're also sharing. Here is an analogy I'd like to share with you that illustrates the connection between apologetics and evangelism. I say that apologetics is like taking out the weeds. Evangelism is throwing in the seeds. It even rhymes to make it easy to remember. So apologetics, you take out the weeds, the challenges, the intellectual challenges and obstacles and problems and doubts from one's mind and heart, so that you can throw in the seeds of the truth, the seeds of faith through evangelism. Both are essential to the mission of the church. In other words, every single one of us as a Christian is called to be an apologist and an evangelist according to the grace and gift that was given to you. In your own way, you ought to defend the faith. Well, you can say, well, I don't like public speaking. I can't preach. You don't have to. Your actions, your words could serve as the greatest apologists or apologetics and the greatest evangelism. Every one of us is called to defend and share our faith. Let me share with you, we'll skip this, or we can go over it very quickly, that apologetics is nothing new. It didn't come up a decade or two ago. Our church fathers, early church fathers, were not just theologians and saints, they were also apologists. Can someone tell me a famous apologist church father? One of the great saints. Yes, sir.
Saint Severus.
Exactly. Very good. Do you know the work he had done that serves as an apologetic work? Okay, he had done several. Who else? Yes, ma'am. Saint Justin Martyr. Exactly. We've got few. We have Saint Athanasius, Saint Athanasius, and his work on the incarnation of the Word against the heathen. All of this is apologetics work. We have Saint Irenaeus against heresies, Saint Justin Martyr, as you said, epistles to the Romans, to Rome, and Saint Clement of Alexandria, exhortate. All of this work serves as apologetics work. Right. What about apologetics? How come I didn't have that? Okay, let me ask you a question now. I thought I had it. Apologetics in the scriptures. Give me a verse that speaks directly to defending or the need to defend our faith. It's in 1 Peter 3:15. It's a very famous verse that speaks to apologetics. It begins with the words, always be ready to give a defense for the reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. Look up this verse if you have your mobile device. It's 1 Peter 3:15. Very important verse. This verse, my friends, tells us 5 important action items or answers 5 questions. What is it that we should do to give a defense? By the way, the original word for defense in this word, in Greek, it's apologia, from which we get apologetics. This verse says what we need to do to give a defense. When do we do it? Always. To whom should we do it? Everyone. Why we should do it? Because we have the reason for the hope that is in us, our faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. And most importantly, how we should do it. At the end of the verse, St. Peter says, with meekness and fear, with grace, with humility, with love. So that is apologetics in the scriptures, apologetics and evangelism. Now let's ask the question, why should we defend our faith? Why? I'd like to hear from you. Raise your hand and tell me. Why should we? Why can't we just live and let live? Yes, sir. Yeah, but when you speak, please raise your voice so we can all hear you.
God calls us to defend our faith.
Absolutely. Because, actually the first point here is because of what we are told. God said it. He said, always be ready to give a defense. He actually said a few other verses. Let me share with you the other verses. Oh, here they are. Okay, always be ready to give a defense to everyone, as I said. Remember the 5 answers to the 5 questions in this verse. This is, if you unpack it, you will see it's basically apologetics in action. St. Paul to his disciple Timothy, in humility, correcting those who are in opposition so that they may know the truth. And St. Paul, I believe, to the Colossians, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. So we're defending, we're correcting, and we're answering. These 3 verses tell us what we should do. But more importantly, how we should do it. More importantly, not just what we do, how we should do it. The first verse tells us, with meekness and fear. The second verse, in humility. The third verse, with grace. Defend your faith. Here's one verse I'll leave you with that sums it all up. Ephesians 4:15. Speak the truth Who can finish the verse? In love. Beautiful verse. Be bold in this day and age. As Christians, we ought to be bold. We ought to speak the truth. We ought to stand firm for what we know to be true, but do so in love, in grace, in humility, in meekness, in fear. That is Christian apologetics. Okay? All right. Another reason why we should defend our faith, not because of what we are told only, because of where we are. Do you think the world around us needs us to defend our faith? Do we have any challenges to our Christian faith? I think we do. I mean, I don't think Ontario in general is very different from California. I mean, the West in general, and all the different challenges. I'm going to get through some of them, but I would like to hear from you some challenges that you face in the society of ours that would help or would necessitate for us to defend our faith. What are some of the challenges? I'd like to hear from you. Come on, engage with me. Tell me. Yes, ma'am. Materialism, beautiful. Beautiful, spot on. Materialism. Our capitalistic society thrives on, well, you got to buy the big house, the nice cars, the nice clothes, basically possessions, materialism. I'm not saying buying a big house and driving a nice car is wrong, and it's the same. That's not what I'm saying. But when you put all your hopes in that and your fulfillment in that, then this is when it becomes, money is not a problem, it's the what? Love of money is the problem. Okay, what else besides materialism? Any other challenges? Yes, ma'am. Beautiful. Well said. We live in a secular society that tries to more and more push God away from every facet of our society, from schools, from politics, from academic world, from our work, every aspect of society. God is being shunned away. It's becoming increasingly atheistic and secular. Very good. Yes, sir.
Like in 2 Corinthians 4-5, it talks about like there's certain pretenses that want to like destroy the knowledge of God. And what you need to do is take hold of that.
Yeah.
And make it obedient to Christ. So like what they could do is corrupt the idea of being Christian and make you follow this one trajectory.
Very good.
And imagine like throwing a dart to a board.
Right.
They'll make you slightly go off.
But what is the challenge? I'm not looking for solutions now.
Okay.
I'm looking for the challenge.
They'll distort the idea of Christ.
Excellent. Distorting the idea of Christ, similar to what you have mentioned. If you've been to the University of Toronto, I know I have been. I've given a couple of talks there, and I saw a booth that says, "We are Muslims and we love Jesus." Very interesting, and it's a big, huge banner. When people said, "Oh, wow, this is awesome. This promotes what? Tolerance and acceptance." Let me figure that out. Of course, this is a very wrong Jesus that is being portrayed to us. Anyways, so where we are. Okay, let me skip this because I went to number 3. Okay, where we are, let's put 2 and 3 interchange it. So where we are, well, Canadians, I'm sure you're not surprised, are less religious than ever before census reveals. Again, I think this goes to the point you just mentioned. And here are some bestsellers. Any of you heard of these books? The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, one of the most famous atheists of our time. I had the pleasure to have met him in Oxford in England and had a conversation with him. Very interesting individual. He is the most vocal, aggressive atheist. Any of you heard of Richard Dawkins? Okay, okay, many of you. All right. Sam Harris and the Faith, The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, God is Not Great by Hitchens. All of these books, they're aimed to basically secularize our society. I wouldn't even say they are atheistic books. I would say they're anti-theistic books. They just don't, deny the existence of God. They attack those who believe in God. What else? Here's the challenge of our anti-Christian culture. Judgment-free zones. This is the secular world we live in. I'm sure you've heard that expression. Hey, listen, this conversation, it's no judging allowed, or judgment-free zone. You can say whatever you want, but I'm not judging anything or anyone. Let me ask you a trick question. We as Christians, should we judge or should we not judge? What do you think? Who says we should not judge? Who says we should judge? Who said we should do both? Exactly. It's the latter, it's the third one. Depending on what it is we're judging or who it is we're judging. Should we judge individuals? Absolutely not. This is up to the great judge, the Lord Jesus Christ. What did he say in Matthew 7:1? You shall not judge lest you be judged. When he was talking, if you look at the context, he's talking about people. We don't judge people. But in another passage in John 7:24, he said, judge with righteous judgment. Wait a minute, my Lord Jesus, I'm confused. In Matthew, you said, do not judge. In John, you said, judge. What do we do? Well, here is the answer, is that you should not judge individuals, but love them instead. Their behavior, their worldview, their actions, their thoughts, their words ought to be judged. What did St. Paul say? Test all things and lay hold to what is. How can I test? How can I even? Maybe the word judge is a little difficult. You know why? We've been conditioned by our secular society not to judge anyone or not to judge anything. All worldviews, all religions, all lifestyles are equally valid and true. That's what our society preaches. Not the case. Not according to the Holy Scriptures. So, maybe you can say evaluate, assess, examine. But we are called to test worldviews, thoughts, words, behavior, and actions, and all of that. All right, so when we say no judging zone, our society says can't judge anything or anyone. Here's another thing I'll point out. The Junior Oxford Dictionary has deleted the word sin from the vocabulary, from the dictionary. I'm not making that up. You can look it up. Since 2018, I believe, the Junior Oxford Dictionary thought that the word sin is meaningless. So they took it out. So, well, if God doesn't exist, who are you sinning against? So they replaced the word sin with the word mistake. They said the word mistake has been there, so we'll just say mistake will suffice. So my dear friends, we're no longer sinners, we are what? Mistakers, according to the dictionary. But think about the consequence and the implication for this. When you remove sin from our vocabulary, everything becomes virtuous. Let me give you examples. Lust becomes sensuality. Pornography becomes art or self-expression. Homosexuality becomes alternative lifestyle. Anger becomes being honest with your emotions. Greed becomes pursuing your Canadian dream, or we have it in the States, pursuing your American dream. Okay? Transgenderism becomes being true to yourself. Be authentic to yourself. And the list can go on and on and on and on. Well, there's no more sin. Everything becomes what? Virtuous. You know what these are? Wolves in what? In sheep's clothing. Sin being covered, enveloped with something so sweet because sin no longer exists. This is a device of Satan. Again, why should we defend our faith? What are we discussing? Because of where we are. All right, let me give you some historical context here. How did we get to this point? I want you to pay attention to this slide because it kind of gives you a quick history of where we were from the first century all the way to where we have become in the 21st century. From the 1st to the 17th century, there was an era marked by pre-modernism. People generally believed in God and they were theistic. Theistic, meaning they believed in God. God did exist. He created this universe. Truth did exist. Truth comes from God by faith. I have faith. Truth comes from God by faith. He does exist. Theism is predominant and all is good from the 1st to the 17th century. I'm not saying there were no atheists then. I'm saying generally speaking. From the 17th century to the 20th century, we go from pre-modern era to modernism. From theism, we believe in God created this universe, to atheism. God no longer exists. It's just the world. And truth does still exist. It no longer comes from God through faith. It comes from science through reason. And people like Immanuel Kant, Sigmund Freud, Charles Darwin, Friedrich Nietzsche, all of these famous advocates of this era propagated basically that ideology. Truth comes from science by reason. Now my question to you, this is a history question. What happened in this era that led to this atheistic movement? 3 events that happened in Western Europe. Yes, sir. The French Revolution. We can also say the Renaissance, the period of the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution. What happens as a result of all of this? People realized or thought they don't need God anymore. We can accomplish things. Sorry, Jesus, or sorry, God, we don't need you anymore. I now can achieve all what I want to achieve. Atheism became very prevalent. Then we move from the 20th century to the era we are in now. So we go from pre-modern to modern to postmodernism. And here's the thing. From theism, the belief that God exists, to atheism, God doesn't exist, realizing that there's a deep, inherent need and desire for the spiritual and the transcendent. So they said, we still need some kind of object of devotion. So they created, society that is, created for themselves 3 other replacement gods, but with a lowercase g. Man-made gods. You know what they are? Humanism, materialism, and hedonism. Humanism basically says, I now become God. I mean, you just have to study the objective of AI, let's say. And we just had a lecture on AI and Christianity a couple of weeks ago. It's very interesting. AI basically strives to make from mortal men immortal beings. When I say men, here's inclusive of women. Okay? So, immortality. I now become God. That's humanism. What is materialism? You said it, someone said it right here. Yes, materialism is the love of possessions, the love of money. What is hedonism? The love of pleasure, physical pleasure. So basically, me, my money, my body. These are the 3 replacement gods, my friends, in our current society. And that's the postmodern era we live in. Now, keep in mind, truth still exists. Now, it doesn't come from God by faith, nor does it come from science by reason. Here's the thing. It comes from me by my feelings. My feelings now become the determining factor of truth. Have you heard this? I'm sure you've heard this expression before. I feel that I am a woman trapped in a man's body, then it must be the case. Well, how do I feel it? Because if you feel it, it must be true. Feelings now become my moral compass, my source of truth, my point of reference. Now, people like, I'm sure you've maybe heard these names, Deepak Chopra, Oprah Winfrey, Eckhart Tolle, Paulo Coelho, and his book, The Alchemist, and several other books basically propagate again the fact that you can invent your own truth, your own reality. Let's tie this back to the scriptures. Everything here we're going to say has its roots in the Holy Scriptures. The first era has this wonderful verse that says the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Can someone give me a verse about the second era? Begins with the words, the fool. The fool, yes sir. Beautiful, thank you. What's your name? Mark, thank you, Mark. The fool said in his heart, there is no God. Do you know what a verse that speaks about the three man-made gods, humanism, materialism, and hedonism? Listen to St. Paul's warnings to his disciple Timothy. 2 Timothy 3:1. St. Paul says, in the last days, men will be lovers of themselves. What is that? Humanism. Lovers of money. What is that? Materialism. Lovers of pleasure. What is that? Hedonism, rather than lovers of God. That's a prophecy about the age we live in currently. So, this is like a quick history of where we have been and how we got into to this point. Let's move on. I'll give you some sound bites. I call this the creed of our culture. So I do what's called on-campus ministries as well as the teaching in the seminaries. I go to colleges and universities in Canada and in the US and in Europe as well, talking about the relevance of Christianity and the relevance of Jesus Christ, basically. And I hear these statements on college campuses. I hope that these are not far off from what you hear as well. I call this the creed of our culture. Here it is. Darwinian evolution explains where I came from. The Bible is an ancient book of fictional stories. Jesus is a very nice man. He was just like any other religious figure. He said good things like Muhammad, like Buddha, like all the other good people. But I cannot say he's God, because that's offensive. Christians, those Christians, they're intolerant, they're judgmental, they're homophobic, they're transphobic. Science, that's my only source of truth. If it is not scientific, sorry, I don't believe it. If I don't see it, I don't hear it, then it's not reality, it's not true. Here's a good one. I am an atheist. I don't need your God to live a good moral life. I am just happy the way I am. Don't shove your God down my throat. I'm happy. I don't need your God to be morally happy. Here's another one that sounds so tolerant. All religions worship the same God. We just call it by different names. Muslims call him Allah. Christians call him Jesus. Buddhists call it Nirvana, yeah? And Hindus call it, 330 million, one of them is Krishna, and others. We just call it by different names. Come on, let's get along and be tolerant and be politically correct with one another. Speaking about politically correct, I'm sure you heard this expression before. Whenever you hear this expression, politically correct, oftentimes it's biblically corrupt. If it is politically correct, it's what? Biblically corrupt. Here's another one. I am spiritual, but I'm not religious. Any of you heard of these expressions before? Well, this is only in the States. You've heard these before. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. Here's this is very interesting. I heard people tell me in conversations these expressions before. Here it is. So when I ask, what do you believe in? I believe in human kindness. Now, what does that mean? I have no idea. It just sounds nice. I believe in love. I believe in compassion. Hello, habibi, hello. What does that mean? Just don't ask. It sounds good. All right. Anyways, now, maybe some other time we can dissect each one of these and see how we can logically respond to each one of these, but that will need another session. All right, so the last and the third and the last point I want to discuss with you. So what did we discuss so far? What is apologetics? What did what's the relationship between apologetics and evangelism, what the word means, and all of that, and the church fathers who were apologists. Great. Defining what defending the faith is. And then now we have just finished discussing why we should defend our faith, and we said 3 reasons. Did we say 3 reasons? Actually, I think we said 2, and I need to go back. Forgive me, I think I missed one of them. My apologies. This was out of order, and that's my fault. There you go. We said 2 reasons. Let me give you the third. The first reason is because God said so. God commanded us to defend our faith, and we shared with you 3 verses of what we should do and how we should do it. Second reason, the world we live in, where we are. There is a third reason, who we are. Very important reason why we should defend our faith. What are we called in the scriptures? We are what to this world? Light. Light to this world, salt to the earth. Light to this world. Now my question to you, what does light do? Think with me. Let's say you're in this beautiful hall and you have perfect vision, but the lights are out. Will you see anything? It doesn't matter if you have perfect vision or not. You won't see anything. So what does light do? Light gives sight. And what does light also do? If you study, biology or plants, light is essential for what? Life. So, think logically. Light gives sight and gives life. I am called to be the light of the world. Therefore, I deduce from this logical argument that I am called to be the sight for the blind, the life for the dead spiritually in this world. That is my job. That's my calling, rather. That's my commission. Light means giving sight to all of those who are blind around us. Do you think there are people spiritually blind around us? You just have to go out this door and not walk too far. Yes. Do you think there are spiritually dead people amongst us? Believe me, there are. What are we called to do? Infuse life and sight to those who are around us. That is what we're called to do, my very dear friends. So this is why we should defend our faith, because of what we are told, who we are, and where we are. Last question here I ask, or last section, is how to defend our faith. Now we get a little more practical. All right, this is a quick review for you. All right, how do we defend our faith? We'll spend, Abuna, how much time we have in the first section? Can you give me maybe 7-8 minutes? 10 minutes? 30? لا كفاية. Okay. يعني maybe 10 to. Okay, I want to of course get some questions from you. So let's finish with how do we practically defend our faith? I would like to hear from you. What should we do first in order for us to be bold in defending our faith? Yes, sir.
Educate ourselves.
So you must. I gotta shake your hand. Thank you, Louis. So we need to first and foremost to defend our faith. We must know our faith. I mean, it's very intuitive. How can you defend something that you don't know? Know your faith. طيب. Let's go back to the scriptures. My favorite passage in Colossians, 2nd chapter of Colossians, verses 6 and 8. Listen to what St. Paul says here. As you have therefore received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk in him, rooted and built up in him and established in the faith. What is that? A command. He's telling us, be rooted, built up, and established in the faith. And by the way, in these two verses, he gives us a command followed by a warning. Because he goes on to say, beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit. So the command is to be rooted, built up, established in the faith. Let me share with you, my friends, the subjects that I think we should all be equipped with We don't need to be subject matter experts, but we need to be equipped with these. This is the seminary subjects that I teach. So if you go over all 10 of them, you're good to go. You've equipped yourself. All you need now is the grace of God to work with you to touch other people's heart. Now, number one, the existence of God. Here, I am an atheist and I come to you and I say, I'm searching for the truth. Do you have evidence that your God does exist? And please don't use the Bible because I don't believe in the Bible. Do you have arguments and evidence for God's existence? Please share that with me. Every one of us should be ready to provide this evidence. Number two, the scriptures, the authenticity of the scriptures. This Bible of yours, this holy book of yours, is it really written by God, or I should say by God and the disciples and the authors together, synergetically? Or is it just a collection of ancient literature, like Dan Brown said in his Da Vinci Code book? Is it really the Word of God? Do you have evidence? Do you have historical evidence, archaeological evidence, scientific evidence? Number three, and my favorite one. This is my favorite one. I'll tell you why. Why am I a Christian? When I ask people, when I go and talk to youth, wonderful youth like yourselves, and I say, why are you a Christian? Why are you not a Muslim or an atheist or a Buddhist or a Hindu or anything else? The last thing I want to hear is, because mom and dad are Christians. That's the last thing you want to say. Okay? That's not a good response. I am a Christian for these reasons. Make sure that these reasons are objective, not subjective. And I get this question from youth all the time. Doesn't matter, all over the globe. My friend is a non-Christian friend. Let's say he's a Buddhist or she's a Buddhist. She thinks she worships the truth. My other friend is Muslim. He thinks he worships the truth. My other friend is Hindu. She thinks she worships the truth. What makes my truth better than their truth? Do you all get this question, or is it just, yeah? Okay. How do we make the case that Christianity is unique and distinct amongst all the world religions? I did comparative religions for 8 years in the university, meaning I studied a lot of religions, a lot of isms, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, postmodernism, a lot of isms. And Christianity was one of them. And objectively, can you declare that this one religion is different than all the others? Society frowns upon that. You know why? Because that's not tolerant. That is not politically correct to say, I am right, you're wrong. That's not what society preaches. But my dear friends, that's what Christ preaches. What did he say to Thomas in John 14:6? I am the way, the truth, the life. And then he said in very exclusive claim that is not very popular nowadays. He said, no one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus, that's an exclusive claim. Are you sure? Yes. What did St. Peter say in Acts 14:12? This is the stone that you rejected, that became the cornerstone. No one, I'm paraphrasing the verse here, forgive me. No name under heaven shall be or shall give us salvation except this name. I butchered the verse. But in other words, he's saying an exclusive claim about the Lord Jesus Christ. So why am I a Christian? That could be a session that we could have in the future, God willing. Number 4, the case for the resurrection. Did Jesus Christ really rise from the dead? Or this is just a story, fictional story? I mean, I haven't seen anybody rise from the dead. How do I know? Is this a historical event or a fictional tale? Ethics and morals. Where do morals come from? Who's to say this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad? Who has the right to declare ethics and morals? Evolution? Is it just me? Is it culture and society? Or does it come from a transcendent, morally perfect being? Number 6, science and faith. Is there a contradiction between science and faith, or do they work together and complement one another? Faith and reason. Number 7, a big one, evolution and creationism. Do we believe in evolution? What type of evolution, if so? Is it theistic evolution that we believe in? Microevolution, macroevolution, Darwinian evolution, all type. What about creationism? What about the Big Bang Theory? What about intelligent design? All of these things we need to have answers for. Here's another very big one. The problem of evil and suffering. The problem of evil and suffering, forgive me. Here's the question I often get. I don't believe in your God. Why, Habibi? Because I don't believe in a God that allows all this evil to exist. All the suffering in this world. This was actually very common during COVID, when a lot of people were suffering and dying. You say your God is merciful and loving and kind and all of that, and He's allowing all this evil to exist? I'm sorry, I don't believe in this God. Or, I don't believe in a God that sends people to hell. Any of you heard of these expressions or come across these expressions? Okay. Problem of evil. And how can we as Christians stand on solid ground and respond to these subjects intellectually, coherently, and also lovingly? Next, worldviews. How we should be educated to know what other people believe in. And the last subject is a philosophical subject, absolute truth. Is truth absolute, or is truth relative? Do you have your truth and my truth? Like I just saw this slogan at the airport here, not far from here. Dare to live your truth. It's very interesting. Your truth? What does that mean? Does that mean I have my truth, you have your truth? What about the truth? The absolute overarching truth? That doesn't exist. You create your own reality. Number 2, how to defend our faith. Excuse me. Knowing the enemy is the second important thing we should do. So number 1, know your faith. When I say defend, you're defending against. So you need to know the enemy you're defending against. A lot of warnings from the scriptures that the enemy comes to us on 2 fronts, my friends. Morally, or intellectually, or both. You're either challenged morally with your conduct, your behavior, your lifestyle, or you're challenged intellectually. A lot of warnings in the scriptures that warn us from the intellectual challenge. I'm not going to read all the verses, just for the sake of time. I want to get to an important point at the end. So, what are these doctrines that St. Paul is warning us against? A lot. Atheism, pluralism. What does pluralism say? All religions worship the same God. Relativism, everything is relative. Humanism, I now become God. Existentialism, in Arabic it's called al-wugudiyya. Existentialism basically says, let's eat and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die. Yani live your life, live it up. Agnosticism, I don't know if God exists or not. Pantheism, everything is, pan in Greek means all. Pantheism, everything is God. Skepticism, a lot of isms I know, but these are the ideologies and doctrines that attack our intellect, our mind. Skepticism, I'm skeptical, I doubt God exists. Naturalism, only this universe that exists and explains reality. And then finally, hedonism, pleasure is God. So these are ideologies and worldviews that are, I would say, a more dangerous enemy than anything that's immoral, that's in your face, because these are very subtle ideologies. Final thoughts I want to share with you. Before I share with you the final thoughts, I have to give you some important principles when we talk about apologetics. So I want you to just, Malish, bear with me. A couple more minutes. We're good? Okay. All day. Important principles when we study apologetics. I want you to pay attention to this because it could be very, very dangerous. I'll tell you why. My dear friends, apologetics does not convert people. You may think that you brought people to Christ because of your eloquence or your clever argumentation or your knowledge. Wrong. The Holy Spirit converts. So what we need to do as apologists and defenders of the faith is to never undermine the power of the grace of God working through us. Because it's the grace of God that pierces the heart of the listener and helps me as the speaker to get to their heart. Listen to what St. Paul says in Corinthians, a beautiful verse that we should have as a slogan for all of us. My speech and my preaching were not with persuasive words of human wisdom. But what, St. Paul? But in demonstration of the Spirit and of power. Why? That your faith should not be in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. I'll tell you a story. So I work in the consulting world, in the business world, in the US, in the healthcare industry. One of my colleagues comes to me, and he's Asian, and he doesn't believe in any religion. He comes to me, he says, George, I hear that you preach Christianity and all of that. I actually would like to know more about Christianity. Are you willing to tell me about your faith? I said, of course. Yeah, you came, that's obviously he came all the way to ask me this question. So I say, absolutely. But I cannot talk about religion in the workplace. I'm sure the same thing in Canada. So I say, okay, let's go out to lunch. And then we actually set up, recurring lunch schedules for weeks to go out and to talk about Christianity. But here's what I do every single time before we go out. I go to my office, I close the door, and genuinely, here's underline the word genuinely, authentically, pray and say the following. I say the following: God, please help me tell him what you want to tell him. Help me become an instrument in your hand to touch his heart. I don't want to win the argument. I want to win his heart. Now, God, I know that you love him more than I love him. You know why? Simply because you died for him, I didn't. So help me be your voice box. And when you pray humbly and genuinely, you'd be amazed how God will work through you, and the Holy Spirit will work through you to be able to touch someone's heart. Only if they are genuinely seeking to know the truth. But if they want to argue, thank you very much. Have a nice day. I'll keep you in my prayers. When you are genuinely seeking, then we can have a conversation. You see the difference? So, well, let me finish the story. What happened to this guy? So I went out with him for almost a couple of months. I gave him the Gospel of John, and he had a lot of questions. And remember, speak the truth in love, because this is how you can capture their heart. And thankfully, he's beginning to, he's progressing in his knowledge of Christ, and there are some very good signs about baptism coming, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to say here in the first point, take the grace of God with you whenever you speak. Number 2, apologetics must first be seen before it is heard. So, what is the greatest apologetics? Our lifestyle, our conduct. You would be doing a huge disservice to Christ when you speak about him and live a very different lifestyle. Because people need to see Christ in you. Here's what I tell my youth, the youth in our church. I say, ask yourself this question. When people see you, do they see you as a Christian, or do they see the Christ in you? Two different things. I want people to see the Christ in me. And I said something also in my social media, which I'd love to connect with you all. And I said this, I think it was Instagram or Twitter. I said, there are two reasons why people reject Christ. Only 2 reasons. 1, they have never met a Christian. 2, they have met a Christian. You see? So let's hope and pray that we're not from that second group. Number 3, we are to win souls, not arguments. We're not here to engage in debates and prove people wrong and flex our intellectual muscles on them. That is not Christian apologetics, my friends. I am more than happy to have come across as if I lost the debate. That's fine. I'm not after the debate. I'm not after the conversation. That's personal. It's not personal. I'm after your heart. I made you think. I'm happy. And I'll pray for you so that God may water that seed. What did the Proverbs, what did Solomon say? He who wins souls is wise, not he who wins debates or arguments. Number 4, we are sowers, not reapers. We're going around throwing the seeds of truth, the seeds of faith, not reaping. The church reaps. Here's a beautiful verse, 1 Corinthians. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. Number 5, 2 more. Some questions will remain unanswered. Why is that? If we can answer every single question, why do I have to have faith? Some questions will remain unanswered, but that doesn't mean that many questions do have answers. Listen to what St. Paul says to the Corinthians. The natural man, or the secular man that is, does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are what? Foolishness to him, nor can he know them. Why? Because they are spiritually discerned. You have to have room for faith. Number 6, the audience is not the enemy we're fighting or defending against. The audience is what? A victim of a common enemy. So what does that mean? I need to put on the lens of compassion and love. I go to universities and conferences like yours, and not in a church setting, in a very atheistic and ruthless settings. I get yelled at, cussed at, and a lot of other things. It's okay. It's not personal. I don't see you as my enemy at all. You are a victim of a common enemy. But when I say that, when I say the word victim, I don't mean we look at them condescendingly. That is not what I'm trying to say. Holier than thou, that's not what I'm trying to say. But when I say look at them with a victim lens, so that you can have compassion on them, not judging them. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age. Number 7, and the last one, be gracious. I cannot overemphasize the need to be loving, gracious, in dealing with others. The last slide, I promise you, is the question for you. How many Gospels do we have? 4. Wrong. We have 5 Gospels. We have Matthew, we have Mark, we have Luke, we have John, and we have the Christian. And many of those you will come in contact with will never have had the chance to read the first 4. You will be the only gospel they will come in contact with. So let us live our life in accordance to our holy gospel. Glory and honor be to his name forever. Amen.